What is a concentrated animal feeding operation, or CAFO? A CAFO is essentially, we've taken animals off the land. They are now confined in buildings above a manure pit. And so it's concentrated because we're concentrating the number, of course. And there's an 8-foot manure pit underneath an operation, typically that holds 1.1 to 1.3 million gallons of manure. They have to empty those pits in the fall. And in the fall of the year, they have truck after truck after truck. These are semi-tankers that are filled with manure, that the semi-tanker then goes out to the field and they apply, I say dump, the manure on the land. And they're supposed to inject that manure, but we know that manure spreading happens at night. Nobody knows where, nobody knows how much manure is going on the land. But imagine you have to empty the pit, and it's even if it's 1 million gallons, and if one semi holds 10,000 gallons of manure, that's 100 trips. I think of our northern Minnesota lakes country, and I think pristine blue waters, and that's the livelihood. That's the economic engine that runs northern Minnesota, is the recreation and the lakes. And what's going to happen here is this industry is going to turn northern Minnesota upside down. It's going to pollute your lakes. It's going to pollute the streams. No one knows where this manure is going to be spread. No one's going to tell you. There's very little oversight. These facilities are dangerous. There are dangerous air emissions, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, methane, other gases. When they're emptying these pits, when they agitate the pits, it causes a tremendous amount of this putrid stench to be emitted. And I'm with my father. He had to step off the combine to vomit. That's how bad it gets.
We talk about sewer application, but when you're looking at a farm that's got, a population of hogs that's 5 times the size of the nearby town, well, the nearby town has a sewage treatment plant. The farm doesn't. It has a pit, it pumps it up, it spreads it on the land. Would you tolerate your community not having a sewage treatment facility and just spreading it on the yards around the neighborhoods? This isn't the family farm as we think of it. And I don't think it's the right fit for a place like Minnesota where there's so much water.
What we know with nitrates in particular and pathogens, disease-causing bacteria and viruses that are in manure, that there are sensitive environments in recharge areas where the water infiltration is so rapid that it's in the groundwater within days to weeks. And if you can imagine what that means, that spreading the manure out across the landscape and a heavy rain comes and it's ending up in your well. I just read an assessment in Iowa that they expect in the next 5 years, Iowans are going to have to spend $330 million to treat their water from nitrate contamination.
CAFOs are a migratory industry. They're moving. CAFOs in Ohio, right, were the source of the pollution that caused the blue-green algae bloom in Lake Erie that shut down the water system in Toledo, Ohio for 2.5 weeks. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their water. They couldn't drink it. They couldn't bathe in it. They couldn't use it. It was toxic. So, when the water becomes so impaired that the CAFO is no longer feasible, they move and leave the pollution behind.
One animal unit's approximately equivalent to 4 people. So if you have a CAFO of 10,000 cows, that's equivalent to a town of 40,000 people in their water use. But the fact is, you're putting a demand on the local water resources that's equivalent to small towns in the countryside.
The global markets that are trying to come into your area are going to affect those property prices. And what we've seen is that it's basically a downward pressure, particularly on the non-farm land. The other downward pressure that you see is that these big operations only buy maybe 20% of their, make 20% of their purchases locally. And so you lose your small producers that are spending about 95% of their dollars locally. And so that downward pressure pushes on your economy also. And then the other thing that happens is the smaller towns have a lot of trouble recruiting new businesses and new residents because of the smells and the flies and just the overall ambiance of the area. And so you'll have downward pressure in your towns. And there's a vibrant, small livestock community of people who are raising cattle in particular, but also sheep and to some extent hogs. And that's the community that we should really be focusing on. Those are the people who spend the money in our area. They're the ones who have kids to fill our schools up. And they're the ones who really care about the local area. So I really recommend that county and town politicians focus on building that part of the ag economy instead of deciding to buy into this global marketplace that's trying to come in.
And then it takes some political will. It takes some will to say, water is important for us and all future generations, and we can't afford to impair it now.
When people contact Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, they have usually just received word or gotten a letter in the mail that a concentrated animal feeding operation or a CAFO is planned for their community, sometimes even just across the fence from the farm that's been in their family for generations. And they're in crisis mode. They're looking for help, for someone to come alongside them who has experienced this before and understands what they're up against. And SRAP provides that support, listening and strategizing with community members based on their goals and their concerns, and helping them navigate the complex, corrupted permitting system. Also while educating their fellow community members about the threat of this industrial livestock model. But we want you to know that you're not alone. There are others all across the country facing the same thing, and we are coming together to correct this system that has allowed corporations to control our food system. But it's going to take all of us, and it's going to be a long uphill battle convincing those in power that there's an alternative to this industrial model. But we see a future where that's possible, where farmers and rural communities can thrive, and where we truly treasure the land and the water that sustains us so that it's preserved for future generations.